Hi everyone, I'm Angela Stockman. Welcome to Make Writing Notebooks. I'm glad that you're here. If you're like me, then perhaps you registered for this course because you are super excited about using notebooks with your students, or you have been for some time and you're looking for new ideas. Or perhaps you're here because, like me, you're struggling to sustain notebook use inside of your own classroom. So I'm going to plan to begin by sharing my own story and some ideas that emerged from my own struggles with implementing notebooks and the success that I found by trying an approach that's kind of an uncommon one. Inside of this course, you're going to find links to resources and materials that will help you establish notebooks in your classroom, as well as assess the growth of notebook users over time. I hope to give you a bit of inspiration and some provocative prompts that you can use with your kids, and I really want to link you out to other great people who are doing inspired work with notebooks in their classrooms and sharing their work in spaces online so that you can also use that as mentor text inside of your classroom with your kids. So whether you're here because it's all going well and you want some new ideas, or you're here because you're finding it very challenging to implement notebooks with your students, I hope that you find this course material useful for you. As you're moving through it, please try to reach out to me. I'm available on Twitter at Angela Stockman, in the Building Better Writers Facebook group, and through email at stockmanangela@gmail.com. And I'll make sure that you have access to all of that contact information inside of the content of this course as well. So, a little bit of my history with notebook use. I began teaching in 1993. I came through a certification program that exposed me to Nancy Atwell and Donald Graves and all of the greats who made workshop what it is, and all of those giants whose shoulders I stood upon at the time really got me excited about the idea of using writer's notebooks in the classroom with my kids. And so I tried and failed miserably for years and years and years. And of course, along the way, I spent a lot of time kind of questioning myself and why I seem to be struggling with this so much when so many other teachers weren't. Of course, this was in the days prior to social media. So there weren't a whole lot of people like there are now around to really support me with that work. I was kind of on my own, and I was kind of a little bit delusional about how easy it was going to be to implement them. So I spent a lot of time questioning my schedule and how I was using my time, and thinking that if I just tightened up my calendar and tightened up my day and became far more disciplined, I would be able to find the time to do notebook writing with my kids. And of course, it wasn't until I kind of thought about things a lot differently that I found a solution. And it's one that's fairly uncommon, I think, and hopefully sharing it with you might be of value. What I realized was that if the notebook was not driving the learning and the work that was happening in my workshop, then it was going to be seen as something that was extra and something that was novel, that notebook keeping was a novel approach. And I even talked about it that way, and we still do that notebooks can be magical and notebooks can be inspiring, and these are wonderful things. But it also sort of distinguishes them as so special that we don't use them regularly, that they're not a common part of what we do every day inside of our workshops. And so I started realizing that perhaps the key to sustaining notebook use was putting an eye on the structure of my day and making sure that the notebook played a really meaningful role in every single moment inside of the writer's workshop. And that in fact the notebook became a tool that drove the learning and work that happened there. So I kind of began reflecting and realizing that in my typical workshop day, kids were doing a bit of pre-session reflection and thinking about what we were going to be doing that day and where they might struggle and where they might find success and what they were going to do if they encountered a dilemma. Then, as some of you know, I engage kids in a lot of fire starters, which are really quick maker challenges that are related to the day's teaching point or learning target. Something along the lines of, use the next 5 minutes and these 3 loose parts to build me a setting for your story. And then of course the next piece would be the mini lesson, which would be focused on writing the session and writing the setting and transforming what they built into print. Just like traditional writing workshop, we moved from the mini lesson into our independent writing time, and that was when I spent some time conferring with kids, providing one-on-one feedback, over-the-shoulder feedback, leading table conferences. And during that time, I would typically try to take note of kids who were doing things a little bit differently and unexpected, stuff that I hadn't taught them, but that was really inspirational and kind of valuable, would be valuable to other kids in the workshop. So after our opportunities for independent writing and perhaps teacher feedback, but then maybe even peer review were over, we would spend some time exhibiting what we learned. So I would call the kids who were doing really interesting things to the front of the room and have them teach the rest of the class what they were doing in order to grow the knowledge and kind of build our collaborative expertise, and also reinforce the fact that I was not the expert, in the room that everyone needed to be turning to, but that they could turn to one another as well. After I had that structure kind of teased out in my head, and I'm leaving a picture of it inside of this course so that you can take a peek at it, I then started mapping the structure for my notebook. So if I was going to begin with reflection and we were going to be doing work with reflection on a regular basis, that was a worthy section for my notebook. If we were going to be doing fire starters and creating builds, perhaps I wanted to create a section of the notebook where kids could mess around with their writing and tinker with it. And in fact, tinkering is a big part of how I have kids work during mini lessons and during their independent writing time, where they will lift a small portion of a draft out, put it in their notebook, and maybe revise it 3 or 4 different ways before they decide which version they like, and then drop that back into their draft. So that tinkering piece is a really common experience inside of my writing workshops. So that's another worthy section to have inside of a writer's notebook. I wanted kids to have a place to keep notes from our mini lessons, or for me to be able to take pictures of my anchor charts and print them and staple them into their writer's notebook so that they could go back to them and refer to them and use them independently. I wanted them to have a place where they could capture the feedback that they were receiving on their work and the advice that I and other writers were giving them about how they could grow. And I wanted them to have a place to document what the strategies that other kids were using that were really valuable. And so the structure for my notebook reflected the section or the different experiences that happened inside of my workshop. And I was making sure that every time we shifted from one experience to another, I would tell writers to turn to that part of their notebook and to use that part of their notebook in a very specific way. Sometimes I would add sections to the notebook that allowed for free writing or journaling. Sometimes we kept a journal separate from the writing notebook. And so I'm going to leave some information inside of this course that distinguishes notebooks from diaries and journals, because I think that this is a really interesting thing to ponder and to talk about. And it's an interesting thing to think about as you're determining what will go in your writer's notebook and how that writer's notebook can become a tool that really drives your instruction. It drives their writing. It drives the learning that happens with all of you inside of your writer's workshop. If you're interested in designing your own notebook and using it with students as you move through the course, I'm going to invite you to do that. You will see some instruction for that and some inspiration for that and choices and ideas in this course as well. But it's not necessary, and so if you're not comfortable or prepared to do that, that's fine as well. Most importantly, I want to make sure that you're leaving with an idea of what your vision is for the notebook that you want your students to create. I want that vision to be informed by your students so that they have ownership of it and they're passionate about using it as well. And I want to make sure that we know how to assess growth toward that vision over time and support one another, as teachers, as students, and as a collective writing community as you're growing and deepening your notebook practices over time. So take a peek around, get a sense of everything that's here inside of the course and how it's organized. Decide where you want to begin your learning as well. I try to leave you with far more than you probably need or wanted to show up for. And I also try to reach out to people ahead of the course and as the course is being executed to see how it's going and to ask you if there's anything else that I can add. So decide what's relevant to you and most meaningful, and tackle those pieces. Move at your own pace and come back whenever you have time to. I know that it may be a very busy time of the year, an overwhelming time of the year wherever you are. And that time of the year tends to be all year in most cases. So there is no pressure, only an invitation to reach out and tell me how I can make the course a little bit better for you. And I look forward to talking more with you and finding out how it's going.